cold. That was the first thing he felt. It was a biting, marrow-deep chill, unlike anything he'd experienced before, like ice pressing into his very bones. But with it came something else sound, a low hum, distant at first, but slowly growing louder as awareness flooded his mind. A hum that was mechanical, like the sound of a dying engine sputtering its last breath. It was both alien and familiar, a bridge between memory and the present. His eyelids fluttered open, heavy with the weight of 30 years of cryo-sleep. At first, everything was a blur of light and shadow, shape swimming before his vision in colors that seemed muted, washed out, as if the world had been drained of vibrancy during his long slumber. Slowly, painfully, he blinked again, and the scene around him began to solidify. The glass canopy above him was cracked, spider webbing outward from a jagged hole near the top. Through it, shafts of pale sunlight filtered down, casting eerie shadows across the sleek silver walls of the chamber. Frost-coated everything glittering crystals clung to the sides of his stasis pod, to the metal railings, and even to his skin. His breath came in shallow gasps, each exhale a plume of mist that quickly evaporated in the cold, sterile air. He tried to move, but his body protested. Muscles long unused screamed in pain, tendons pulling taut like overstretched cords. With great effort he managed to lift his right arm, flexing his fingers as sensation began to return. His hand, pale and trembling, looked foreign to him, like it belonged to someone else. It had been so long since he had seen it. 30 years. 30 years. 30 years lost in the dark void of cryo-sleep. The hum in the background faltered, and with it, the dim lights inside the pod flickered. Panic surged through him as his brain finally kicked into gear. Where am I? The thought sliced through the haze like a blade, sharp and urgent. He turned his head, scanning his surroundings. His pod was nestled within the wreckage of what appeared to be a control room, though most of the consoles were now dark and lifeless. Pieces of shattered equipment were scattered across the floor, tangled in vines and strange, bioluminescent plants that crept through cracks in the walls. The room, once sterile and pristine, had become a battleground between technology and nature. A thin layer of dirt and moss covered everything, as if the planet itself had begun to reclaim the ship's remains. His ship. The word triggered a cascade of memories, disjointed and fractured, flashing in his mind like the flicker of a dying flame. He remembered the mission Earth's desperate gamble to explore the far reaches of space. He remembered the crew, their faces blurry but familiar, their names just on the edge of recollection. And he remembered the accident, the catastrophic malfunction, the alarms blaring, the sickening lurch as the ship spiraled out of control. Then, the darkness. The cold embrace of cryo-sleep. The sound of movement soft, barely perceptible snapped him out of his thoughts. His breath caught in his throat, and he strained to listen. There it was again, a soft rustle, like leaves brushing against each other. It was coming from outside the pod, just beyond the shattered glass. His pulse quickened as adrenaline surged through his system, sharpening his senses. He wasn't alone. Forcing his body to move, he braced himself against the sides of the pod and pushed. The pain was unbearable, but he gritted his teeth and shoved harder until the stasis door hissed open with a reluctant groan. Cold air rushed in, but with it came the scent of something unexpected, something sweet and floral, like wildflowers carried on a summer breeze. The scent didn't belong here, in the wreckage of a spacecraft. It was alive. His boots hit the ground with a dull thud, and his legs buckled beneath him. He caught himself just in time, gripping the edge of the pod to steady himself. He took a moment to breathe, to assess his condition. His muscles ached, his skin tingled with the lingering effects of stasis, but he was alive. He was breathing. As he straightened, the soft rustling grew louder. Slowly, cautiously, he turned toward the source of the sound. And there they were. At the edge of the room, bathed in the soft glow of bioluminescent flora, stood a figure. No, not just one, there were several, half hidden in the shadows. They moved with a quiet grace, their footsteps barely disturbing the overgrown plants that had taken root in the ruins. He blinked, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The figures were humanoid, that much was clear, but their appearance was anything but human. They were tall, slender, and elegant, with skin that shimmered faintly in the low light, as though the very air around them was alive with energy. Their eyes, large and luminous, watched him with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. But it was their beauty that struck him most of all. It was a beauty so otherworldly, so ethereal, that it left him breathless. The one closest to him stepped forward, and as she did, the soft light illuminated her features more clearly. Her hair, a cascade of silver, seemed to flow like liquid metal down her back, and her skin, a pale violet hue, glowed softly in the twilight. She wore something akin to armor, but it was unlike anything he had ever seen, organic in design, as if woven from the planet's own life force. Delicate vines and crystals were integrated into the material, creating patterns that shimmered with every movement. He took a step back, his heart pounding in his chest. His mind raced with questions, but none of them made it to his lips. He was too overwhelmed by the sheer strangeness of it all, by the feeling that he had awoken in a world that wasn't meant for him. The woman, if that's what she was, raised a hand, palm out, in what seemed to be a gesture of peace. Her lips moved, and though no words reached him at first, there was something in her expression that conveyed understanding. Slowly, cautiously, she spoke again, her voice soft and melodic, like the sound of a breeze through the trees. The language was foreign, but not entirely incomprehensible. There was an odd rhythm to it, a cadence that made him think of music, though the meaning of her words eluded him. He tried to respond, but his throat was dry, and all that came out was a rasping sound. The woman tilted her head, her gaze softening, as if she understood his struggle. For a moment they simply stood there, staring at one another, two beings from different worlds, separated by an unbridgeable gulf of time and space. But in that silence, something passed between them. It wasn't quite understanding, but it was a beginning. She gestured toward the door, the soft lines of her body moving with fluid grace. The others, still in the shadows, watched him intently, their eyes glowing like distant stars. He hesitated. Should he trust them? What choice did he have? His body still ached, and he was unarmed, vulnerable. But there was no threat in her posture, no malice in the way she extended her hand toward him, as if inviting him into their world. It was an offer he couldn't afford to refuse. With a deep breath, he took a tentative step forward, closing the distance between them. As soon as his foot crossed the threshold of the doorway, the world outside the ship opened before him like a dream. He had expected a barren, desolate landscape, something like the hostile worlds his crew had been trained to survive on. But this was nothing like the hostile environments he had prepared for. The landscape was alive in ways he could hardly fathom. Towering trees with glowing leaves stretched toward a sky tinged with soft purples and blues. Strange bioluminescent plants pulsed with light, their tendrils swaying in the breeze like underwater creatures. The air itself seemed to hum with energy, vibrant and warm, as if the planet was alive and breathing with every gust of wind. And everywhere, the women watched him. He wasn't sure if it was fear or fascination in their eyes, but they surrounded him, whispering in their musical language, their voices like a symphony in the air. His heart pounded in his chest, and he fought to keep his breathing steady. He was a stranger here, an intruder in a world that had been untouched by human hands. But as the woman beside him smiled, just a small, soft smile, something in him relaxed. There was a part of him, deep down, that had always longed for adventure, for the unknown, and now, against all odds, he had found it. "Where am I?" he finally managed to ask, his voice hoarse and shaky. The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she pointed toward the horizon, where the sun was just beginning to set, casting the sky in shades of gold and amber. And as the light illuminated the strange, beautiful world before him, she spoke in that melodic language once more. This time, though, there was no mistaking the reverence in her tone. "You are home," she whispered. The alien women moved ahead of him, their graceful forms nearly silent as they led him through a dense forest of towering trees, their leaves glowing faintly with soft blues and greens. The light filtered through the canopy, casting shifting patterns of luminescence across the forest floor. Each step they took was deliberate, fluid, as if they were attuned to the pulse of the world itself. Ilara, The warrior who had first approached him in the wreckage of his ship moved with a lethal grace, her silver hair catching the ambient light as she glided ahead. Her violet skin gleamed in the soft twilight, a living part of this alien tapestry. Every now and then she would glance back at Eric, her luminous eyes studying him, measuring him. She was the leader here, or at least the one responsible for him, and despite her beauty and the serenity she exuded, Eric could feel the coiled tension beneath her surface, a readiness for violence if necessary. Behind her walked Zaya, the other woman he had met. Unlike Alara, Zaya's role in their society seemed less martial and more cerebral. She had a soft but piercing gaze, her intelligence evident in the way she observed him. She had spent most of the last hour attempting to communicate with him, using a strange device, some sort of biotech tablet that translated fragments of their language into his, though the process was slow and limited. Every word was precious, but it was clear that Zaya was determined to learn about him and to share their world in return. Eric's eyes wandered to the landscape around him, taking in the surreal beauty of the forest. It felt almost like stepping into a dream, too vivid, too ethereal to be real. The trees were unlike anything on Earth, with trunks so wide it would take a dozen people to wrap their arms around them, and their bark shimmered as though veins of energy ran beneath the surface. Strange plants, both beautiful and dangerous looking, blossomed along the path, their colors ranging from deep violet to shimmering gold. Some pulsed with a faint inner light, others emitted a soft hum, as though singing to the rhythm of the world around them. He felt the weight of his mission on his shoulders, or what was left of it. What had gone wrong? His memories of the crash were fragmented, incomplete. He had vague recollections of the ship spiraling out of control, alarms blaring, and the panic in his crewmates' eyes. There had been something they hadn't anticipated, but beyond that, his memory was a blur. "What happened to the rest of my crew?" he had asked Zaya earlier, his voice hoarse from disuse. Zaya had simply lowered her gaze, sadness flickering in her eyes. No answer. They knew more than they were telling him, of that much he was certain. But he couldn't blame them. He was an outsider, and trust would have to be earned. Still, the absence of any trace of his crew gnawed at him. There were no bodies, no graves, no signs that they had survived or perished. It was as if they had vanished, erased from existence. But how? His thoughts were interrupted by Alara's voice, soft but commanding. She had stopped ahead and was now gesturing toward a break in the trees, where the dense forest gave way to an open expanse. Eric moved closer, his curiosity piqued. What he saw took his breath away. The forest opened onto a vast, crystalline lake, its waters so clear they reflected the sky in perfect detail. In the distance, rising from the lake's center, was a towering structure, a spire made of smooth, black stone that seemed to absorb the light around it. It was impossibly tall, stretching high into the sky, and at its peak, strange lights pulsed, casting faint ripples of energy across the water's surface. "The Heartspire," Zaya said, her voice reverent, as if the very word carried ancient weight. Eric frowned, the name unfamiliar but strangely fitting. The structure looked like a heart, a pulsing beacon in the center of this alien world. But it was more than just a monument. He could feel it, the hum of energy in the air, the way the ground seemed to vibrate ever so slightly beneath his feet. This place was alive with power. Ilara stepped forward, turning to face him. "This is the center of our world," she said, her voice carrying an authority that was hard to question, even with the language barrier. "Everything begins and ends here." Eric's gaze was drawn to the spire again. "What is it?" he asked. Zaya approached him, holding up the translating device once more. "The Heartspire is ancient," she said after a moment of processing. "It was here long before our people arrived. It is the source of many things: power, knowledge, life." "Life," Eric repeated, his brow furrowing. Zaya nodded, and this time there was a somber note in her voice. "Our world is tied to it. Without it, we would not exist." Eric stared at the structure, trying to grasp the enormity of what she was saying. An ancient spire, the center of their world, tied to their very existence. It sounded impossible, yet here it stood, undeniable and awe-inspiring. He felt a pang of uncertainty, wondering what role this spire played in his own fate. Could it be connected to the crash of his ship? Could it explain why he had survived and why his crew had not? As if reading his thoughts, Zaya continued. When your ship fell from the sky, the Heartspire sensed it. It called to us. IT... protected you. Eric's head snapped toward her. Protected me? How? Zaya hesitated, as if searching for the right words. The Heartspire's energy flows through this world, through everything. It slowed the decay of your body, kept you in stasis even after your ship's systems failed. Without it, you would have died long ago. Eric's mind reeled. This ancient structure, this alien technology, had saved his life. It had kept him alive, preserved him in a state of stasis for 30 years. But why? And more importantly, why only him? Why me, he asked, his voice thick with the weight of the question. Ilara and Zaya exchanged a glance, a silent communication passing between them. Ilara's expression tightened, and for a moment, Eric saw something flicker in her eyes. Fear, no, something deeper, something close to reverence. The prophecy, Ilara said softly, the words almost lost on the wind. Eric blinked. Prophecy, the word hung in the air, heavy with implications. Zaya stepped forward, her gaze locked onto his. There is an ancient prophecy, one that has been passed down through our people for generations. It speaks of a time when our world would face a great threat from beyond the stars. It speaks of a man, a traveler from the void, who would come to protect us. Eric felt the ground shift beneath him. His heart pounded in his chest, each beat like a drum of disbelief. A prophecy? About him? He wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. He was no savior, no chosen one from an ancient myth. He was a man, just a man lost in the cosmos, trying to survive. You think I'm this? Traveler, he asked, incredulous. Zaya nodded solemnly. We do not believe in coincidence. Your arrival was foretold long before any of us were born. The Heartspire guided us to you. Eric took a step back, his mind racing. The ship's crash, the Heartspire, this prophecy, it was all too much, too surreal, too impossible. He had come here on a mission of exploration, to find new worlds, new life, not to fulfill some ancient prophecy. I don't know what you think I am, he said, his voice tight with the strain of it all. But I'm just a man, a human, my crew ... my mission. I don't even know what happened to them. Ilara stepped closer, her presence steady and grounding. You may not believe it now, she said quietly, but you are here for a reason. The Heartspire chose you just as it chose us. Eric shook his head, feeling the weight of their belief pressing down on him. He was no hero. He had barely survived the crash. But as he stared at the Heartspire, its pulsing lights reflecting in the still waters of the lake, a part of him, the part that had always yearned for something greater, couldn't help but wonder. What if they were right? As the suns dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shades of twilight, Eric knew one thing for certain. His life, whatever remained of it, was now inextricably bound to this world and its people. And somewhere, deep within him, the echoes of the past, his lost mission, his forgotten crew, whispered their unanswered questions. The journey had only just begun. The wind swept across the lake, carrying with it a faint hum that Eric had come to associate with this planet's energy. It was as though the very air was alive, charged with the pulse of the Heartspire, that ancient monument that loomed in the distance. He had been here for weeks now, living among these alien women, each day bringing new revelations, deeper mysteries, and more unsettling questions. Tonight the sky was different. The twin moons hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, and the stars, once so serene and distant, now glowed with an ominous intensity, as if the cosmos itself were watching. Eric stood on the shore of the crystalline lake, staring at the Heartspire's dark spire rising into the sky. Its smooth, black surface absorbed light, and at its apex, the faint glow of energy pulsated in a slow, rhythmic beat, like the heartbeat of the planet itself. He felt drawn to it, as though it was calling him, whispering in a language only his subconscious could understand. Behind him, the village of the alien women hummed with activity, their soft voices and graceful movements a stark contrast to the tension that had been growing ever since Zaya had told him of the prophecy. The women believed in it so deeply, but Eric still struggled to accept that he was part of some cosmic design, destined to protect a world he had never known. He heard footsteps behind him, soft, almost imperceptible, and he didn't need to turn to know it was Alara. She had a way of moving that was almost silent, a predator's grace tempered with the gentleness of a protector. She had been his constant shadow, teaching him the ways of her people, showing him how to adapt to their world. But despite the closeness they had developed, there was still a distance between them, a space filled with unspoken truths. "You're troubled," Alara said, her voice soft but steady. She came to stand beside him, her silver hair shimmering under the light of the twin moons. Her violet eyes reflected the distant glow of the Heartspire, and for a moment Eric was reminded of just how alien and beautiful she was. "How could I not be?" he replied, his gaze still fixed on the spire. "You tell me I'm part of some prophecy, that this world expects me to be something I'm not." And now he gestured to the sky, where the stars seemed to burn brighter than they should. "Something's coming, isn't it?" Ilara's expression darkened, her sharp features softening with concern. She didn't answer right away, her eyes tracking the same stars that had caught his attention. Finally, she nodded, almost reluctantly. "Yes," she admitted. "The Heartspire has been reacting. Zaya and the scholars have felt the energy growing unstable for days. We believe the ancient enemy is returning." Eric turned to her, the weight of her words settling heavily on his chest. "The enemy from the prophecy." She met his gaze, her expression unflinching. "Yes, the nomads of the void. They are called the Zuran in our oldest texts, a race of conquerors who devour worlds for their life force. They are relentless, and their technology is far beyond anything we possess." The words sent a shiver down Eric's spine. The idea of a race that traveled the stars, consuming entire planets, was terrifying in its scale and implication. He had encountered hostile alien life forms during his time as an explorer, but this was something far greater, far more dangerous than anything humanity had ever prepared for. "You believe they're coming for this world?" he asked, his voice thick with disbelief. Ilara nodded again, her gaze hardening. "We don't just believe it, we know it." Eric's mind raced. He had spent his entire life exploring the vast reaches of space, pushing the boundaries of human knowledge, but never had he imagined facing something like this, a force so powerful it could destroy worlds. He looked back at the Heartspire, its steady pulse, now seeming like the countdown to some inevitable calamity. "How do you know for sure?" he asked, needing to understand. "What makes you so certain they're coming?" Ilara hesitated, her eyes flicking to the distant village. "There is something you must see," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Something Zaya and the others have been preparing for you. It's time you learned the full truth about the Heartspire and about your role in this." Eric's stomach twisted with a mixture of dread and anticipation. For weeks, he had felt like he was living in the shadow of something monumental, something just beyond his reach. Now, it seemed that shadow was about to reveal itself. "All right," he said, nodding. "Show me." Without another word, Ilara turned and began walking back toward the village. Eric followed, his mind spinning with questions, each one more urgent than the last. The soft glow of the alien plants lit their path, casting ethereal light on the narrow trail as they moved deeper into the forest. The village had been built into the natural landscape, blending so seamlessly with the environment that it was hard to tell where nature ended and architecture began. The alien women's homes were crafted from living materials, trees that had been shaped and coaxed into structures, their trunks hollowed to form doorways and their branches woven into intricate roofs. Vines and crystals adorned the buildings, their natural bioluminescence casting a soft glow over the entire settlement. As they approached the heart of the village, Eric noticed that many of the women were gathered near the central meeting hall, their faces solemn, their movements purposeful. They parted as Ilara and Eric walked through, their gazes filled with a mixture of reverence and apprehension. They were waiting for something, or perhaps waiting for him. At the entrance to the hall stood Zaya, her violet eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made Eric's breath catch. She was holding the biotech tablet she often used to communicate with him, but tonight there was something different in her posture, something urgent. "You're ready," Zaya said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "Follow me." Eric exchanged a glance with Alara, but she simply nodded, her expression unreadable. Taking a deep breath, Eric followed Zaya into the hall, his heart pounding in his chest. The interior of the hall was dimly lit, the walls lined with strange organic symbols that glowed faintly in the darkness. The air was thick with an energy Eric couldn't quite describe, a hum that seemed to vibrate through his bones. At the far end of the hall, set into the floor, was a large circular platform made of the same black stone as the Heartspire. It pulsed with light, casting shadows that seemed to dance along the walls. Zaya stepped onto the platform, motioning for Eric to follow. He hesitated for a moment, but the gravity of the moment pushed him forward. As soon as he stepped onto the stone, he felt it an overwhelming rush of energy, like a current of electricity running through his veins. He gasped, stumbling slightly as the sensation took hold, but Zaya steadied him with a firm hand on his arm. "Relax," she said, her voice calm. "It's the Heartspire. It's connecting with you." Eric's eyes widened. "Connecting with me? What do you mean?" Zaya gave him a small, knowing smile. "The Heartspire is more than just a monument. It's a living relic of an ancient civilization that once thrived on this planet. It holds the collective knowledge and power of those who came before us. And now, it's reaching out to you." Eric's heart raced as he processed her words. "Why me?" Zaya's expression grew serious. "Because you are the one the prophecy spoke of, the traveler from the stars. The Heartspire recognizes you as part of the final defense against the Zoran." Before Eric could respond, the platform beneath him pulsed with a brighter light, and suddenly the entire room shifted. The walls fell away, replaced by a vast, starry void, and Eric found himself standing in the center of what felt like the universe itself. Stars and galaxies swirled around him, their light casting brilliant patterns across the dark expanse. "This is a memory," Zaya's voice echoed in the void. "A memory of the past of the ones who built the Heartspire." As the stars coalesced, a scene unfolded before Eric's eyes. He saw a planet, lush and green, not unlike the one he stood on now. But it was teeming with life. Buildings rose into the sky, ships flew through the atmosphere, and the people. They were not so different from the alien women he had come to know. They were vibrant, powerful. Their society advanced far beyond anything Eric had ever imagined. But then, the scene shifted. Dark ships appeared on the horizon, massive vessels that blotted out the sun. The Zoran. Eric recognized them immediately. The ships descended upon the planet with terrifying speed, and in an instant, the world was engulfed in fire and destruction. The Zoran forces, with their cold, metallic technology, swept across the planet, consuming everything in their path. "The Zoran feed on life energy," Zaya explained, her voice somber. "They drain it from planets, leaving nothing but lifeless husks behind. Our ancestors tried to fight back, but they were no match for the Zoran's power. In the end, they activated the Heartspire as a last resort, a way to preserve their knowledge and protect the survivors." Eric watched in horror as the planet crumbled beneath the Zoran's assault. The cities were reduced to ash, and the once thriving civilization was wiped out in mere moments. The last thing he saw before the vision faded was the Heartspire, glowing with a desperate energy, its light growing brighter and brighter and brighter, until it consumed everything. The vision ended, and Eric was back in the hall, the platform still glowing beneath his feet. He stared at Zaya, his mind reeling from what he had just witnessed. "That's what's coming?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Zaya nodded, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Yes, the Zoran are returning, and this time we don't have the strength to stop them." Eric's hands clenched into fists. "But you think I can?" Zaya stepped closer, her gaze intense. "The Heartspire chose you. It preserved you for a reason. You hold the key to activating the last defense of this planet. But you must embrace your role, Eric. You must accept that you are part of this prophecy." Eric's heart pounded in his chest as the weight of her words settled over him. He had come to this planet as an explorer, a man searching for new frontiers. But now, he was something else, something he didn't fully understand. He wasn't ready for this. He wasn't a hero or a warrior. or some chosen savior of an alien world. But as he looked at Zaya, at the determination in her eyes, he realized he had no choice. The Zoran were coming, and they wouldn't stop until they had consumed everything. Eric took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the Heartspire beneath him. He could feel its energy flowing through him, a power that he hadn't asked for, but now couldn't deny. "Tell me what I need to do," he said, his voice steady. Zaya's expression softened, a flicker of hope in her gaze. "We will prepare you. But know this, whatever happens, you are not alone. We will fight with you." As Eric looked around the hall, at the faces of the alien women who had come to trust him, he knew that his journey had only just begun. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined, and the fate of an entire world now rested on his shoulders. The cosmic threat was coming, and there was no turning back. The sky had darkened. What once was a tranquil expanse of purples and golds had turned into a roiling tempest of unnatural clouds, seething in the atmosphere like a brewing storm. There was an electricity in the air, thick and suffocating, and with every passing hour, the tension on the planet grew. The Zoran were coming. Eric Faulkner stood at the edge of the village, staring at the horizon. His body was tense, every muscle primed for action, yet his mind whirled in a storm of doubt. For days he had been preparing alongside the alien women, each of them training with an intensity that betrayed the depth of their fear. Despite their beauty and grace, these women were warriors determined, skilled, and deadly. Yet even with all their training, Eric knew the truth: they were outmatched. The Zoran fleet had been spotted the day before. At first it was just a dark blot in the sky, barely discernible against the starry backdrop. But as the hours passed, that blot grew, spreading like an infection. Now, their ships loomed in the distance, vast and ominous, casting long shadows over the land. The size of the fleet was staggering, each ship a fortress in its own right, bristling with weapons and dark energy. Behind him, the village was alive with activity. The alien women, their faces set with grim determination, moved through the streets in swift, efficient motions, readying their defenses. Ilara led the warriors, her silver hair catching the fading light as she barked commands in their melodic, alien tongue. The warriors moved with discipline, their organic armor glinting under the moonlight, their weapons drawn and ready. Zaya was at the heart of the preparations, overseeing the technological defenses. Since the revelation of the Zoran's approach, Zaya had worked tirelessly to unlock more of the Heartspire's secrets, deciphering the ancient technology that could be their only hope of survival. With her keen intellect and tireless focus, she had managed to activate some of the more advanced defense systems hidden within the Spire's core, long dormant weapons that had not been used since the time of their ancestors. But even she couldn't mask the fear that lurked behind her eyes. Eric inhaled deeply, trying to clear his mind. His hand instinctively went to the weapon at his side, a plasma rifle, one of the few pieces of his ship's technology that had survived the crash and still functioned. Zaya had modified it, incorporating some of the planet's biotech, making it more powerful than before. Yet even with it in his hands, he felt woefully underprepared. "Eric." The voice pulled him from his thoughts, and he turned to see Ilara standing beside him, her expression steely but calm. Her violet eyes searched his face, reading the doubt there. She had a way of seeing through him, of cutting past the surface to the core of his fear. "You're ready," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. Eric shook his head, his brow furrowed. "Am I? Look at them." Ilara, he gestured to the horizon, where the Zoran ships hovered like dark specters. "We're outnumbered, outgunned. How do we fight something like that?" Ilara's gaze was unwavering. "We fight because we have no choice. We fight because if we don't, we will lose everything. Our people, our world, we cannot let them take it." Her words were fierce, but Eric could hear the edge of uncertainty in her tone. She, too, knew the enormity of what they faced. But where Eric saw fear, Ilara saw purpose. She was a warrior, through and through, her life dedicated to protecting her people. And she would fight to the last breath, if it meant giving them a chance. Eric exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I don't know if I'm the one they need. I'm not what the prophecy says I am." Ilara's gaze softened, just for a moment, and she placed a hand on his arm. Prophecies are stories we tell ourselves to make sense of the unknown. But you don't need to be a part of a prophecy to make a difference. Eric, you're here, now. And that's enough. Her words struck something deep within him, a spark of determination that had been buried under the weight of doubt. He had spent his entire life exploring the stars, seeking the unknown, chasing adventure. And now, faced with the greatest threat he had ever encountered, he had to fight. Not for himself, but for the people who had come to depend on him. "Let's do this," he said, his voice stronger than he felt. Ilara gave a curt nod and turned back toward the village. "Zaya is waiting for you at the Heartspire. There's something she needs to show you before the battle begins." Eric's pulse quickened. He had spent days working with Zaya, learning about the ancient technology buried within the Heartspire, but there were still so many mysteries left to uncover. If Zaya had found something important, it could mean the difference between victory and annihilation. With one last glance at the darkening sky, Eric followed Ilara back toward the Heartspire. The Heartspire stood as it always had, an indomitable monument rising from the center of the village, its black stone surface gleaming under the moonlight. But tonight, there was something different about it. The energy that radiated from the spire was stronger, more intense. The ground itself seemed to hum with power, vibrating with a rhythm that Eric could feel in his bones. Zaya was already there, standing at the base of the spire, her hands moving rapidly across the surface of a glowing control panel that had emerged from the stone. Her face was lit by the soft glow of the technology, and her brow was furrowed in concentration. "Zaya," Eric called as he approached. "Ilara said you found something." Zaya looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and urgency. "Eric, you need to see this." She motioned for him to step closer, and as he did, the glowing panel shifted, displaying a complex array of symbols and diagrams that he didn't fully understand. But Zaya's voice was quick, explaining in the rapid tones she used when her mind was racing. "The Heartspire has been communicating with us," she said. "It's been trying to show us the way to activate the full potential of the ancient technology. The weapons we've unlocked so far are only a fraction of what it can do." Eric's heart skipped a beat. "You mean there's more?" Much more. Zaya's eyes gleamed with the weight of the revelation. The Heartspire is not just a defensive structure. It's a conduit, a bridge between worlds. It holds the key to tapping into the life force of the planet itself. Eric stared at her, his mind struggling to keep up. Tapping into the planet's life force. What does that mean? Zaya's expression turned grave. "It means that the Heartspire can draw on the energy of the planet, every living thing, every plant, every creature, and use it to power its defenses." But she hesitated, her gaze dropping. "There's a cost." Eric's stomach dropped. "What kind of cost?" Zaya's voice was quiet. "If we activate the full power of the Heartspire, it will drain the life force from the planet itself. It will devastate the ecosystem, potentially kill everything that lives here. The energy it releases will be enough to destroy the Zoran fleet, but it could also destroy us." Eric's mind reeled. The thought of such power, such a terrible choice, it was unthinkable. Sacrifice the planet to save the people? Or try to fight the Zoran with the limited defenses they had and risk total annihilation? "There must be another way," he said, his voice thick with desperation. "We can't just—" A deep rumble interrupted him, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The Heartspire pulsed with sudden, violent energy, its black stone surface glowing with an eerie light. Eric spun around, his heart pounding. "They're here," Zaya whispered, her face pale. The first wave of Zoran ships descended upon the planet like a plague of locusts. Their sleek, metallic forms blotted out the sky, casting long, ominous shadows over the land. From the village, Eric could see them approaching, their engines roaring as they cut through the atmosphere with terrifying speed. The ground trembled beneath their weight, and a low, ominous hum filled the air. The alien women were ready. Ilara had gathered the warriors in a defensive line, their organic weapons drawn and pulsing with energy. The air was thick with tension, every breath a countdown to the moment of impact. Eric stood at the front, rifle in hand, his heart pounding in his chest. The Zoran ships hovered just above the village now, their dark, insect-like forms looming overhead. He could see the faint glow of their weapons systems powering up, the same cold, lifeless energy that had destroyed the world in the vision Zaya had shown him. "This is it," Alara said, her voice low and steady. She was standing beside him, her silver hair gleaming in the moonlight. "We fight now, for our world, for each other." Eric swallowed hard, his grip tightening on his rifle. "For all of us." The Zoran struck without warning. A blinding beam of energy shot from the nearest ship, tearing through the village's outer defenses in a flash of light and fire. The ground shook violently, and the sound of the explosion was deafening, reverberating through the air like the roar of a god. "Incoming," Alara shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The warriors scattered, moving with a practiced precision that betrayed years of training. Eric ducked behind a nearby structure, just as another beam of energy struck the ground where he had been standing. The heat from the blast seared his skin, and he winced, his heart racing. "They're targeting the Heartspire," Zaya called from her position near the spire, her voice laced with panic. "If they destroy it, we lose everything." Eric peeked out from behind the cover, his mind racing. The Zoran were relentless, their ships circling the village like vultures, firing beam after beam of energy. The village's defenses were holding, but barely. Every hit weakened the shield systems that Zaya and the other scholars had managed to activate. His breath came in quick, shallow bursts as he watched Alara and the others engage the Zoran foot soldiers, who had descended from the ships in waves. The battle was brutal, chaotic, with energy weapons flashing through the air and the eerie hum of Zoran technology filling the space between each clash of blades. Eric raised his rifle, taking aim at one of the Zoran soldiers, a tall, insectoid creature encased in black, metallic armor. He squeezed the trigger, and the modified plasma rifle let out a high-pitched whine before a burst of energy shot forth, striking the creature in the chest. It staggered but didn't fall. With terrifying speed, it turned toward him, its eyes glowing with a cold, alien light. "Shit," Eric muttered, ducking as the Zoran soldier retaliated, a beam of energy whizzing past his head. He rolled to the side, coming up behind another piece of debris, and fired again, this time hitting the soldier squarely in the neck. The creature collapsed, its body sparking and twitching as the life drained from it. But for every soldier they killed, more seemed to take their place. The Zoran forces were endless, an overwhelming tide of death and destruction. Eric could feel the desperation mounting, could hear it in the ragged breaths of the warriors around him, see it in the way Zaya's hands trembled as she tried to maintain the defenses. "We can't hold them off forever," Zaya called out, her voice rising in panic. "We need to activate the Heartspire's full power." Eric's heart lurched. The choice was upon them, faster than he had anticipated. Activate the Heartspire, unleash its devastating power, and risk destroying the planet, or fight on with the hope that they could somehow hold off the Zoran. He turned to Alara, his pulse racing. "We don't have a choice, do we?" Ilara's expression was grim, her eyes hard. "No. If we don't use the Heartspire, they will kill us all." Eric looked at Zaya, who stood at the base of the spire, her hands poised over the control panel. She was waiting for his signal, waiting for his signal, waiting for him to make the decision that could either save or destroy them. His mind raced. The Zoran ships loomed overhead, their weapons still firing relentlessly. The village was on the brink of collapse, and the alien women he had come to care for, Alara, Zaya, and all the others, were fighting for their lives. He clenched his fists, his jaw tight. This world had become his home, these people had become his family. He couldn't let them die. "Do it," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Activate the Heartspire." Zaya's eyes widened with a mixture of fear and resolve, but she nodded. Her hands moved swiftly across the control panel, and the Heartspire began to glow brighter, its pulse quickening. The ground beneath them trembled, and a deep, resonant hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. Eric could feel it, the energy, the raw power building within the spire. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced, a force so vast and primal that it seemed to resonate with the very core of the planet. The light from the Heartspire grew blinding, and the air crackled with electricity. The Zaran ships turned their attention to the spire, their weapons targeting it with renewed fury. But it was too late. With a deafening roar, the Heartspire unleashed its power. A massive wave of energy erupted from the spire, spreading out in all directions like a tidal wave of light and sound. The Zaran ships were caught in the blast, their hulls disintegrating upon impact, their dark forms crumbling into ash and dust. The soldiers on the ground were obliterated, their bodies vaporized by the sheer force of the energy. But the wave didn't stop there. Eric could feel the life force of the planet being drawn into the Heartspire, the very essence of the world being consumed to fuel its power. The trees, the plants, the creatures, all of them were part of the wave, their energy feeding the weapon that was their last hope. As the light spread across the land, Eric's heart clenched with the realization of what they had done. The village around him was bathed in the same glow, and he could see the life draining from the plants, from the creatures that called this place home. The world was dying, and it was his choice that had set it in motion. The Zaran were destroyed. The threat was gone. But at what cost? The silence that followed the Heartspire's eruption of energy was the kind that pressed down on the soul. It was the absence of life, a hollow, echoing quiet that swept across the landscape, once teeming with vibrant beauty. Eric stood at the heart of it all, his chest rising and falling with shallow, uneven breaths. The afterglow of the Heartspire's power still lingered in the air, a faint hum that barely touched the senses, but its devastation was absolute. The Zaran were gone, obliterated. Their ships, once dark clouds on the horizon, had been reduced to smoldering wreckage, nothing more than distant memories of a cosmic threat. The warriors who had descended to the planet's surface, with their insectoid armor and lethal weapons, were dust scattered in the wind. The village, the people, they were safe. But the price of that safety hung heavy in the air. Eric's eyes drifted across the landscape, taking in the destruction. The lush forest that had surrounded the village, once alive with bioluminescent flora and towering trees, was now a wasteland. The vibrant plants that had pulsed with life and color had withered, their glowing leaves darkened to brittle husks. The ground beneath his feet, which had once thrummed with the heartbeat of the planet, was now cold and lifeless, the energy drained from the very soil. He could feel it in the air. The planet itself was dying. The life force that had sustained it for millennia had been siphoned off to fuel the Heartspire's final strike, and now the world was a shadow of its former self. The weight of his decision crushed him, and for a moment Eric couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He had saved the people, yes, he had stopped the Zaran, but in doing so, he had condemned the world itself. A hollow victory. Eric. The voice, soft and full of sorrow, pulled him from his thoughts. He turned to see Ilara standing a few feet away, her silver hair still glowing faintly in the moonlight, though now it seemed muted, dimmed by the weight of what had transpired. Her violet eyes, once so fierce and full of purpose, were now clouded with grief. Behind her, the surviving women of the village stood in silence, their faces etched with the same mixture of relief and sadness. They had won the battle, but it had come at a cost none of them had anticipated. Ilara took a step closer, her hand resting lightly on the hilt of her sword. "It's over," she said softly, though the words carried no joy, no triumph. "The Zaran are gone." Eric nodded, but the movement felt mechanical, detached. His throat was dry, his voice hollow when he finally spoke. "But so is the planet." Ilara's gaze dropped to the ground, her fingers tightening around the hilt of her weapon. "We knew this was a possibility," she said, her voice tight. "We knew what we had to sacrifice to stop them." Her words made sense, but they didn't soothe the ache in Eric's chest. He had come to this world as an outsider, a lost traveler, but over time it had become something more. He had built connections, forged bonds with these people. He had fought beside them, bled beside them. And now the world they had fought so hard to protect was slipping away, its life force drained to the point of no return. Zaya approached from the direction of the Heartspire, her normally serene expression strained with exhaustion. She had been the one to activate the final weapon, the one to release the devastating power that had saved them all. But as she reached Eric and Ilara, her eyes were haunted, dark circles beneath them evidence of the toll it had taken. "The Heartspire is quiet now," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's spent. Whatever power it had left is gone." Eric turned to face her, his heart sinking. "Is there anything we can do? Any way to reverse what's happened?" Zaya shook her head, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "The planet's life force has been drained beyond what it can recover on its own. There were systems in place to replenish the energy over time, but the Zoran's attack and the power we unleashed have disrupted everything. It would take centuries, maybe millennia, for the planet to heal, if it can heal at all." Eric's stomach twisted. The hope he had been clinging to evaporated in the harsh light of reality. This world, this beautiful, alien world that had somehow become his home, was dying, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. For a long moment, the three of them stood there in silence, the weight of their choices pressing down on them. Around them, the women of the village began to gather, their faces a mix of exhaustion, grief, and quiet acceptance. They had won the battle, but the war had taken something irreplaceable from them. Eric felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Ilara, her violet eyes filled with an intensity he hadn't seen since before the battle. "We can't give up," she said, her voice firm. "There has to be something, some way to save what's left." He searched her eyes, seeing the fierce determination there. She was a warrior, yes, but more than that, she was a protector. She had spent her life defending this world and its people, and she wasn't ready to surrender, not yet. Eric's mind raced, grasping for any possible solution. The Heartspire was spent, the planet's energy drained. But the spire itself had been designed by an ancient civilization far more advanced than anything Eric or the women could fully comprehend. There had to be something they had missed, some technology, some secret buried within the spire's depths that could help them. "Zaya," Eric said, his voice gaining strength. "You said the Heartspire was a conduit, a bridge between worlds. Could it be possible that there's still a way to access its energy, to reverse the damage somehow?" Zaya frowned, her eyes narrowing in thought. The Heartspire was designed to channel the planet's life force, but it's possible there are other systems, deeper within its core, that we haven't been able to unlock. I've only scratched the surface of what the spire is capable of. "Then we need to go deeper," Eric said, the fire of determination igniting in his chest. "We need to find whatever's left, any technology, any systems that could help us save this world." Ilara nodded, her expression hardening with resolve. "I'll gather the warriors. We'll protect you while you and Zaya work." Zaya glanced between them, a spark of hope flickering in her tired eyes. "It's risky. There's no guarantee we'll find anything that can help." Eric met her gaze, his voice steady. "We don't have a choice. We owe it to this planet, to the people, to try." Hours later, Eric, Ilara, and Zaya stood at the base of the Heartspire, the entrance to its inner sanctum yawning open before them like the maw of some ancient beast. The warriors had formed a protective perimeter around the area, their faces grim but determined. They knew the stakes. The Heartspire's energy had faded to a faint glow, barely noticeable in the dim light of the dying planet. But as they stepped inside, Eric felt the hum of power beneath his feet, faint but unmistakable. There was still something alive within the spire, some remnant of the ancient technology that had saved them once before. "We'll have to go deeper than we've ever gone," Zaya said, her voice echoing off the smooth, black stone walls. "There are chambers below the surface that we've never been able to access, locked by systems we don't fully understand." Eric nodded, his hand resting on the plasma rifle strapped to his back. "Then we unlock them, whatever it takes." The corridors of the Heartspire were cold and silent, the walls lined with the same glowing symbols that had guided them before. As they descended deeper into the structure, Eric could feel the weight of the planet's history pressing down on him. This place had been built by a civilization long gone, their knowledge lost to time. But their technology had survived, waiting for someone to unlock its secrets. After what felt like hours of descending through narrow passages and vast, echoing chambers, they reached a large, circular door at the bottom of the spire. It was massive, its surface covered in intricate carvings that glowed faintly in the dim light. "This is it," Zaya said, her voice filled with awe. "The final chamber." Eric stepped forward, his pulse quickening. He reached out to touch the door, feeling the cool, smooth stone beneath his fingers. As he did, the carvings began to glow brighter, pulsing with energy. The door shuddered, and with a low, grinding sound, it began to slide open. Inside was a vast, open chamber, its ceiling stretching high above them, disappearing into the darkness. At the center of the chamber was a massive, pulsating core of energy, bright, blinding and filled with a power that Eric could feel vibrating in his bones. It was the heart of the Heartspire, the source of its incredible power. Zaya gasped, her eyes wide. "I've never seen anything like this." Eric stepped closer, his breath catching in his throat. The core was alive, a swirling mass of light and energy, and as he approached, he could feel it reaching out to him, like it recognized him. "This is the key," Zaya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The core. It's still alive. If we can figure out how to access its energy, we might be able to reverse the damage." Ilara stepped forward, her eyes locked on the core. "Then let's figure it out." They worked in silence, Zaya's hands moving over the control panel that had emerged from the floor, her mind racing as she tried to decipher the ancient technology. Eric and Ilara stood beside her, their eyes on the core, the weight of the planet's future resting on their shoulders. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Zaya let out a breathless gasp. "I think I've got it." The core pulsed brighter, and the air around them crackled with energy. Eric felt a surge of power wash over him, like the very life force of the planet was flowing through his veins. "Eric," Zaya said, her voice urgent, "you have to touch it. The core needs you, it's been waiting for you." Eric's heart pounded as he stepped forward, his hand reaching out toward the swirling mass of energy. As his fingers brushed the surface, a blinding light engulfed him, and the world fell away. When the light faded, Eric found himself standing in a vast, starry expanse. The universe stretched out before him, infinite and eternal, and in the distance he could see planets, stars, galaxies swirling in the cosmic dance of existence. "You are the traveler." The voice was not human. It was ancient, deep, and resonated with the power of the cosmos itself. Eric turned to see a figure standing before him, an ethereal being made of light and energy, its form shifting and flowing like the stars themselves. "You have unlocked the Heartspire's true potential," the being said, its voice echoing in the void. "But the choice remains yours." Eric's heart raced. What choice? The choice to save this planet, or let it die. Eric felt his breath catch in his throat. There's still a way to save it. The being nodded. The Heartspire is more than a weapon. It is a conduit for life itself. You have the power to restore this world, to heal the damage that has been done. But it will come at a cost. Eric's pulse quickened. What cost? The being's eyes glowed brighter. You. Eric's mind reeled. Me. The Heartspire will take your life force, your energy, and use it to heal the planet. In doing so, you will become part of this world, its guardian, its protector. But you will no longer be human. You will be one with the planet for as long as it lives. Eric stared at the being, his heart pounding in his chest. The choice was impossible, yet clear. He had come to this world as an explorer, seeking adventure and discovery. But he had found something more, something worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for. He thought of Ilara, of Zaya, of the people who had come to depend on him. He thought of the planet, beautiful and vibrant, teetering on the edge of destruction. He knew what he had to do. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady. "I'll give my life to save this world." The being nodded, its form glowing brighter. "Then it shall be so." The light engulfed him again, and Eric felt the universe shift around him, the energy of the Heartspire flowing through him, consuming him. He could feel the planet beneath him, the life force returning, the world healing. And as the light faded, Eric Faulkner was no more. The village stood in silence, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon. The women gathered at the edge of the heartspire, their eyes filled with awe and wonder. The air was alive again, the trees and plants glowing with the soft light of renewed life. Ilara stood at the front of the group, her heart aching with the weight of loss. She knew what had happened. She could feel it in the air, in the very ground beneath her feet. Eric was gone. But he had saved them all. As the sun rose, casting golden light over the now-healed world, Ilara looked up at the heartspire. It pulsed with energy, a reminder of the sacrifice that had been made. The world had been saved, and Eric Faulkner had become its guardian, forever entwined with the life force of the planet. Ilara closed her eyes, a single tear slipping down her cheek. She whispered a quiet farewell to the man who had come from the stars, the man who had saved them all. And as the dawn broke, a new day began, one filled with hope, renewal, and the promise of a brighter future.